For so long, you have been deeply invested in the narrative of your own recovery, desperately clinging to the idea that you are still broken. In doing so, you entirely overlooked the profound instant when the fractures actually fused back together. Throughout the years, adopting the persona of the eternal seeker offered you a safe haven. It granted your life a sense of meaning and provided a structured framework for your struggles. However, as of today, that very same refuge has transformed into a cage. Nearly every guru and mystical philosophy has conditioned you to believe that existence is an infinite upward battle, an unceasing quest to evolve into a superior, more aligned, and worthier version of yourself. This represents the grand illusion of the in-between, a captivating deception designed to keep your gaze fixed on a distant horizon that you are never meant to reach. You developed a dependency on the pursuit itself. Consequently, when your destination was finally reached, the landscape was unrecognizable. It lacked the triumphant parade you were promised. Instead, you experienced an overwhelming void, a bizarre, muted, and faintly disturbing stillness. To be completely transparent, you were anticipating a majestic, cosmic celebration to announce your victory. Yet all that greeted you was an absolute quiet. Do not mistake this quietude for defeat. Rather, it serves as the ultimate confirmation that the transition is over. Your era of evolving has concluded. The exhausting endeavor of willing your desires into physical form through relentless mental pressure has achieved its intended finale. You have officially stepped off the mapped terrain, and the foundation beneath your feet right now belongs to the era beyond observation. This goes far beyond mere symbolism. This marks the exact juncture where the outdated mechanics of your existence, the physics defined by grueling effort and constant delays, have been swapped out for a fully synchronized, integrated operating system. Reflect on the crushing, exhausting weight you have carried over the past 10 years. Recall the brutal psychological policing required to filter every single thought, shield every feeling, and artificially elevate your frequency even while your personal universe felt like it was crumbling. You functioned as a quantum artist, painstakingly striving to collapse infinite possibilities into singular moments of lived experience through the sheer magnitude of your focus. That paradigm was unbelievably draining because it relied on a foundational flaw: the illusion of detachment. It assumed a division between the you standing here and the reality out there that desperately required your manipulation. Yet, in recent times, a monumental pivot occurred. That heavy burden dissolved without warning. You may have misinterpreted this sudden lightness as a collapse in ambition or a slide into melancholy. However, a deeper examination reveals an absence of sorrow. What remains is an expansive, impartial tranquility. In advanced quantum terminology, this phenomenon is known as decoherence, the precise threshold where a localized vulnerable wave integrates flawlessly with its broader surroundings. You have dissolved back into the universal field. You are no longer the detached witness manipulating events. You have transformed into the very reality that simply exists. Consequently, your former spiritual strategies now feel entirely useless, like dead weight in your hands. Attempting to chisel a masterpiece that is already polished is futile, just as visualizing a destination you currently occupy is absurd. The disorientation you are battling right now is merely the lingering shadow of your outdated seeker ego, desperately hunting for a dilemma to fix within a life that has ultimately transformed into a pure solution. A vast majority of individuals shrink in terror at this phase, as to an uninitiated observer, it mimics stagnation. Under the old rules, progress was validated by intense friction, relentless hustle, and the chaotic pendulum swinging between extreme euphoria and deep despair. Once those chaotic fluctuations cease, the mind goes into overdrive. It questions why the intoxicating rush of manifesting or the dramatic release of purging is gone. It begins to worry that it has grown numb, indifferent, or completely severed from the divine. Rest assured, what you are navigating is not indifference. It is the purest, most elevated tier of coherence. It is the absolute 0 point of your own awakened consciousness. Within this newly unlocked paradigm, you are liberated from being a casualty of the observer effect because you have transcended the split between the one who watches and the object being watched. You have crossed into a realm of unified existence where the gap between a desire and its physical expression has been completely annihilated. For decades, you were instructed that the cosmos was paying attention to your intentions. Now, the profound truth is dawning on you. The universe is not listening to your voice because you are the universe. Grasping this reality shatters the entire illusion of the transition, decisively proving that there is absolutely nowhere left to travel. The transitional journey was merely an exercise in recalling your innate power. This post-observer phase is the lived reality of actually wielding it. You have permanently graduated from the classroom of attempting and have taken your rightful place within the grand architecture of being. Experiencing a sense of being adrift in uncharted lands without a guidebook is the definitive hallmark of your graduation. Every piece of wisdom you previously consumed was formulated solely to deliver you to this exact gateway. From here onward, no doctrine can dictate your steps, because in this space, you are the singular force drafting the laws. You have dedicated your entire lifetime hunting for outside approval, begging for cosmic signals, and craving external reassurance to confirm your trajectory is correct. However, as you navigate this post-observer epoch, external omens and synchronicities will cease to manifest before your eyes. Why? Because their point of origin has shifted entirely inward. You have become the living embodiment of the sign you were searching for. Your very breath and presence serve as the ultimate validation. Consider the cyclical traumas and repetitive behavioral patterns that once tormented you. When you observe them now and realize their venom can no longer penetrate your nervous system, recognize that profound detachment as your official certificate of graduation. When you gaze upon the swirling turmoil of the collective world and experience a deep, objective serenity instead of a visceral spike of terror, you have successfully earned your master's degree in energetic mastery. You are by no means shedding your human nature. Rather, you are exquisitely refining your divine essence. Your core operational agenda has shifted dramatically. Your business is no longer about conjuring trivial, incremental alterations to your personal narrative. Instead, your role has expanded into anchoring and stabilizing the fundamental tapestry of the dimension you currently inhabit. Naturally, you might experience a sense of cognitive dissonance, that persistent whisper of doubt, the suspicion that this new state is suspiciously effortless or merely a figment of your imagination, is simply the dying breath of the old paradigm. It is desperately attempting to drag you back into the familiar, exhausting loop of striving. It demands that you equate suffering with evolution, pushing the narrative that without agony, there is no advancement. Yet, you have matured far beyond the need to utilize hardship as your primary catalyst for change. You have crossed the threshold into a realm where monumental expansion blossoms out of absolute stillness, and true creation is birthed through simple, profound recognition. This precise juncture demands immense courage. You must possess the bravery to definitively declare that the eternal seeker within you has perished. It is imperative that you release your grip on the persona of the flawed individual constantly in need of fixing or healing, and confidently step into the identity of the master who has firmly arrived. Understand the mechanics of this space. Should you insist on playing the role of the perpetual student, the quantum field will eagerly supply you with endless, grueling exams. If you persist in acting as though you are still crossing a transitional bridge, the universe will ensure you perpetually remain in a frustrating state of almost arriving. Navigating the post-observer terrain requires an uncompromising, radical level of self-honesty. It demands that you observe the frictionless nature of your current existence and cease dismissing it as a temporary stroke of luck. It insists that you embrace the profound quiet within your consciousness and stop mislabeling it as a hollow void. What you are witnessing is the uncompromising, tangible reality of applied quantum mechanics. Once the one who observes and the object being observed become so inextricably entangled that they merge into absolute unity, the observer effect transforms from a mere technique into your permanent baseline of existence. You are no longer the external force forcing the wave to collapse. You have fundamentally become the wave itself. You have shed the role of the sculptor fiercely hammering away at a block of stone. Instead, you are the living marble, effortlessly reconfiguring itself into the embodiment of your most supreme wisdom. The transitional phase merely served as the temporary scaffolding holding you up. The magnificent architecture of your being is now complete. It is time to walk through the front door and inhabit it. All the familiar spiritual instruments that once served you so faithfully, the intense visualizations, the elaborate rituals, the unyielding mental focus, have thoroughly exhausted their utility. They were merely the training wheels assigned to a consciousness that had not yet fully recognized its own sovereign power. Now, true courage lies in your willingness to lay those heavy tools down. You must acknowledge that the updated physics of your operating system no longer demands your sweat and exertion. It asks only for your pure, unfiltered presence. You are not losing your sharpness. You are solidifying your absolute mastery. You are not lagging behind the pack. You have simply ceased sprinting because you recognize that the finish line has already been crossed. The deep quietude you are immersed in is the sacred pause right before the birthing of entirely new worlds. This represents the ultimate graduation you secretly feared might never manifest, the definitive death of the transitional myth and the dawn of your true purpose as the architect of the absolute. If these words cause a resonance deep within your cellular structure, resist the urge to logically dissect the feeling. Just breathe into the truth of it. The crossing is finished. You have anchored yourself here, leaving only one spectacular question hanging in the air. What magnificent form will you choose to embody, now that the desperate obligation to try to be anything has completely vanished? Any lingering friction you happen to feel in this moment is not an indicator that you have veered off course. Rather, it is the visceral grinding of an infinite soul that has drastically outgrown its previous mechanical confines. For countless years, you relied heavily on the implements of the quantum artisan, reciting affirmations, holding rigid visual imagery, and wielding your willpower like a weapon to carve the raw, unformed substance of the quantum field into your preferred reality. Those methods were your absolute lifeblood, the very instruments that proved your escalating power. But suddenly, overnight, they morphed into burdens. They now feel incredibly clumsy, disjointed, and bizarrely counterproductive. When you attempt to sit down and forcefully visualize a future outcome, you are met with overwhelming apathy, or even a flash of mild frustration. When you recite your once powerful affirmations, they ring out like hollow, meaningless syllables echoing through an abandoned room. You might harbor a secret panic that your connection to the divine source is eroding, or that your spiritual edge has dulled. Yet, the underlying truth is infinitely more magnificent. You are undergoing the necessary ego death of the sculptor because you have fully graduated into becoming the very substance of the marble itself. The obsolete physics of your old reality fundamentally relied on a chasm existing between the watcher and the world being watched, a vast distance that you constantly had to bridge using the sheer velocity of your intention. However, within this elevated post-observer reality, that gap has been utterly annihilated. Consequently, every single time you attempt to pick up those outdated tools of manifestation, you are accidentally resurrecting the very illusion of separation that you worked so hard to transcend. You are senselessly bringing a heavy hammer to a delicate reality that now instantly bends to your faintest whisper. That resulting friction you feel is simply the universe gently, yet firmly, informing you that your rigorous training is officially complete. To truly comprehend the reasons behind the intense friction generated by your former methodologies, we need to analyze the architectural layout of the so-called artisan paradigm. During that bygone era, you played the role of the master carver, positioned distinctly apart from the raw slab of potential. A stark boundary existed between the self that desired a specific outcome and the quantum fabric that dispensed it. This inherent division served as the core foundation of your entire metaphysical operating system. Because a vast expanse separated you from your goal, forceful impact was mandatory. Your mental imagery acted as the sharp chisel biting into the granite, while the sheer ferocity of your emotional output provided the brute strength swinging the mallet. Such a mechanism functioned flawlessly because you were tethered to the traditional physics of cause and effect. A calculated dose of energetic investment would ultimately crystallize into a tangible material result. It constituted an elegant and deeply empowering choreography, yet it remained a profoundly externalized performance. You were persistently exerting force upon the surrounding environment. The harsh, grinding sensation you are enduring today stems from the absolute truth that you no longer reside outside the uncarved stone. You have completely fused with the cosmic material. Consequently, whenever you attempt to forcibly envision a goal from this newly achieved plateau of oneness, you are metaphorically battering your own consciousness with your own carving tools. It feels aggressively jarring because it constitutes a direct assault on your upgraded state of being. You have ceased being the localized agent forcing events to unfold. Instead, you have expanded into the vast, open arena where reality spontaneously blossoms. That phase of the relentless artisan was an absolutely vital evolutionary stepping stone, functioning as a crucible to temper your fractured awareness into a highly tuned, laser-focused instrument. However, stubbornly clinging to those archaic implements today is akin to a visionary architect hauling around a rusted box of hammers, even after unlocking the miraculous ability to command a skyscraper to assemble itself purely through the luminous clarity of their mental blueprint. The most insidious and enduring manifestation of this energetic resistance is hidden within the very practice of mental imagery. For generations, spiritual communities have championed visualization as the supreme master key to unlocking reality creation. Yet, as you navigate the advanced post-observer landscape, the act of visualizing frequently degrades into a subtle declaration of spiritual poverty. By forcefully imagining a yet-to-be-experienced timeline, you are inadvertently broadcasting a powerful signal to both your deep subconscious and the unified field, screaming that this desired experience is glaringly absent from your current coordinate. You are casting your conscious focus into an imaginary someday and somewhere else, a habit that only fortifies the deceptive narrative that your immediate here and now are critically defective or incomplete. Back in the outdated matrix, the energetic field could easily absorb this contradiction because the illusion of distance was a built-in rule of the simulation. But now, having breached the threshold of the post-observer frequency, your personal vibration has accelerated to such a dizzying altitude that the universe exclusively mirrors your fundamental state of existence, entirely ignoring your manufactured mental pictures. If your motivation for visualization stems from a desperate craving for circumstances to alter, the cosmos simply mirrors back that intense craving, not the physical alteration. This explains the paradoxical phenomenon where your trusted manifestation routines appear to actively repel your deepest wishes. Each time you deliberately sit down to attract something, you are loudly broadcasting a cosmic declaration of your isolation from the prize. You are artificially resurrecting the ghost of the carver and the stone, a fragmented duality that your higher self permanently threw away. The abrasive resistance you encounter is simply the protective feedback loop of a neural network that has become far too integrated to stomach the toxic falsehood of division. Let this truth settle. You are no longer in the business of conjuring unprecedented events out of thin air. Instead, your task has simplified into merely acknowledging the treasures that already exist within the infinite borders of your expanded aura. Navigating this profound pivot demands a leap from the strenuous labor of constructing mental holograms into the weightless grace of absolute, instantaneous certainty. Creating images is a grueling procedure tied to linear progression. Profound certainty is an immovable state of grace. Imagination is inextricably bound by the constraints of time, whereas pure knowing operates in the blinding flash of the immediate present. During your tenure as the striving artist, success hinged on your ability to meticulously construct a psychological framework and grip it with ironclad discipline until it crystallized into matter. Conversely, in the post-observer dimension, your only requirement is to gaze upon a fundamental truth until its presence becomes glaringly undeniable. Consider the vast gulf between the frustrating cognitive strain of trying to recall a forgotten acquaintance's name versus the thoughtless, breathing reality of knowing your own identity. The latter requires zero expenditure of calories. You do not need to visualize a mental storyboard to confirm that you are breathing. This absolute zero-point effortlessness is the exact frequency you are now being summoned to personify. The primary culprit behind your current spiritual exhaustion is that utilizing those obsolete tools forcibly evicts you from your organic baseline of total unity, dragging you kicking and screaming back into the synthetic, manufactured role of the eternal hustler. The hustler's mind is perpetually obsessed with auditing outcomes, obsessively tracking arbitrary metrics of success, and anxiously scanning the distant skyline for incoming ships. However, the awakened consciousness understands implicitly that the horizon is nothing more than an optical illusion, a trick of the light engineered by the limited lens of a fragmented, isolated ego. Once you embody the totality of the field itself, the concept of a horizon evaporates completely. What remains is only the boundless, eternal now, fluidly reconfiguring its molecular structure to perfectly align with the silent, indisputable decrees of your internal convictions. Should you find yourself battling waves of severe lethargy or a total collapse of worldly ambition, understand that it is likely your higher soul launching a full-scale strike, flatly refusing to play the antiquated, blister-inducing game of endless striving. You are undergoing an intense cosmic retraining program, learning to navigate the cosmos via pure harmonic resonance rather than blunt force trauma. Examine the deep psychological friction surrounding this monumental shift in identity. For an eternity, your ego structure was proudly erected upon the pedestal of being an unstoppable, conscious architect of reality. Claiming that mantle felt incredibly intoxicating. It served as a monumental, triumphant leap away from the miserable trenches of feeling like a helpless casualty of random destiny. Nevertheless, even the exalted title of the Creator conceals a treacherous, invisible snare of duality. By definition, a creator remains an independent entity, manipulating a separate material. To successfully breach the gates and occupy the architecture of the Absolute, you must surrender the glorious crown of the architect and willingly dissolve into the masterpiece itself. This signifies the ultimate, irreversible funeral of the stone carver. It is the shattering epiphany where you finally comprehend that there is no separate you pulling the levers of manifestation anymore. Ultimately, what remains is simply the universe exploring its own boundless possibilities, exclusively through the unique lens of your localized awareness. This profound recalibration perfectly explains that bizarre wave of emotional apathy or severe detachment you have likely been navigating. Back when you inhabited the role of the artisan, your ego was heavily entangled in the final result of your labor. Every single strike against the stone felt like a matter of life or death. However, once you realize you are the actual stone, the specific shape you momentarily assume loses its desperate importance simply because you possess the absolute certainty that you are the underlying material of all possible physical manifestations. Do not misconstrue this profound non-attachment as an icy heart or spiritual numbness. On the contrary, it represents the absolute zenith of energetic security. The desperate compulsion to manipulate circumstances evaporates because you finally comprehend that every conceivable destiny already resides within your expansive field. The abrasive friction instantly vanishes the very millisecond you relinquish the exhausting need to aggressively govern events, choosing instead to simply rest as the pure, unadulterated awareness, observing them unfold. At this precise juncture, the archaic, mainstream doctrine known as the law of attraction is entirely superseded by the phenomenon of instantaneous cognition or profound knowing. The very word attraction inherently dictates a spatial void. It whispers that the object of your desire is distant and must be painstakingly dragged into your orbit. That represents the outdated, exhausting physics of the stone carver. True knowing, conversely, rests on the unshakable premise that your desire is already occupying your current space, merely waiting patiently for the heavy curtain of your own cognitive dissonance and skepticism to be pulled back. Upon migrating fully into the post-observer paradigm, you permanently retire from the exhausting business of trying to lure a superior existence toward you. Instead, you pivot to simply validating and acknowledging the flawless reality that is simultaneously broadcasting on your immediate frequency. Migrating from the chronic state of seeking into the serene state of being constitutes the most revolutionary, audacious leap of faith you could ever possibly execute. It is terrifying solely because it demands unwavering, unconditional trust in the unseen architecture of the now. Naturally, your logical brain, heavily programmed by the terrestrial matrix of linear cause and effect, absolutely despises this sensory vacuum. It screams out to physically intervene, begging to deploy a familiar ritual or technique just to simulate the comforting illusion of forward momentum toward a tangible target. Yet, the awakened master inherently grasps a counterintuitive truth. The most potent, world-bending labor you can engage in is the discipline of remaining completely motionless while the surrounding quantum field frantically restructures itself to match your new baseline. That lingering energetic friction is nothing more than your ego's frantic, desperate campaign to maintain its own relevance, fabricating artificial problems and busy work in a space that requires absolutely none. To unlock true mastery, you must willingly embrace feeling entirely useless or unproductive by society's obsolete metrics. Only by surrendering that old hustle can you ascend to true omnipotence within this upgraded operating system. The moment you consciously drop your manifestation tools, you will witness the total evaporation of the temporal delay you previously accepted as an inescapable law of physics. The concept of a time lag was exclusively a byproduct of the perceived spatial distance separating the artist's initial intention and the stone's eventual physical compliance. It was merely an artificial buffer zone, sustained entirely by your persistent belief in isolation and detachment. However, once you recognize yourself as the fundamental substance itself, there is nowhere left for a signal to travel, because your localized consciousness and the infinite quantum fabric have merged into identical entities. The conception of an idea and its materialization in the physical realm are no longer sequential steps. They are the exact same unified event, merely observed from two differing dimensional vantage points. The abrasive heat you previously endured was generated by the sheer velocity of your desires trying to smash through the dense, atmospheric drag of your own deeply ingrained doubts. Inside the post-observer landscape, the concept of a journey is obsolete. No travel occurs. There is only a microscopic recalibration of your focal lens. You are no longer attempting to teleport from an inadequate here to a glorified there. You are abruptly waking up to the staggering realization that there was an illusion, and here is all that has ever existed. Welcome to the profound architecture of the Absolute. You are definitively finished constructing a life from scratch. Your new occupation is effortlessly curating the specific timeline that perfectly corresponds to the profound depth of your energetic arrival. The brutal struggle you endured was never genuinely a war against external circumstances. It was always an intimate, internal conflict featuring a localized artist who had not yet remembered they were comprised of the same stardust as the canvas. Now that this amnesia has cleared, the chisel must be permanently abandoned. Let the friction die. The legendary masterpiece you sought is not an external object you are agonizingly assembling. Rather, it is the radiant state you are finally permitting yourself to embody. This absolute architecture is by no means a geographical coordinate or a final finish line to aggressively sprint toward. It is simply the pure, distilled state of being that lingers when the exhausted traveler finally collapses onto the earth, only to realize that the long, punishing road behind them was merely a projection cast by their own shadow. Having successfully discarded the developmental training wheels of repetitive spiritual exercises, you have crossed into an elevated domain where your silent, Breathing presence acts as the sole catalyst, dictating the shape of your universe. In this concluding chapter of your evolution, the heavy, demanding title of the creator is shed in favor of the infinitely more elegant role of the curator. You are absolutely done laboring to build a world. Your only remaining task is to gracefully select and inhabit the parallel reality that resonates symmetrically with your awakened frequency. To navigate this post-observer continuum with supreme efficacy, you must rapidly download and integrate the updated principles of the enlightened architect. This upgrade begins with the most revolutionary and non-negotiable psychological pivot of all, the absolute assumption of arrival. Since birth, societal and spiritual conditioning have brainwashed you into worshiping the treacherous journey, idolizing the grueling process, and romanticizing the painful agony of becoming. Your fractured ego discovered a twisted, perverse sense of security in playing the role of the perpetual wanderer, someone eternally positioned just an inch outside the spotlight, obsessively diagnosing one last energetic blockage, dissecting one final childhood trauma, or dismantling one more limiting belief. However, within the crystalline structure of the Absolute, that journey has unequivocally terminated, permitting any stray thought, spoken word, or physical action to spawn from a mindset of trying to get there serves as a massive cosmic broadcast of your own lack. It acts as a direct insult to the staggering level of mastery you have already secured. To genuinely assume the posture of arrival is to profoundly acknowledge that the mythical, flawless version of yourself you spent decades trying to build is, in fact, the standard baseline of your breathing reality right now. This marks the definitive death of striving and the glorious inauguration of pure, unadulterated existence. When you anchor your daily operations firmly in the frequency of arrival, your fundamental relationship with the concept of time mutates entirely. Under the oppressive rules of the old matrix, time functioned as a frustrating barricade, insulating your intention from its physical materialization, a vast chasm that demanded to be bridged with excruciating patience and relentless hustle. Yet, for the awakened architect who has completely dissolved into the very fabric of the cosmic marble, an impossible paradox arises. If you are already the entire field, across what imaginary distance could your signal ever possibly need to travel? Once you fully embody the quantum field itself, the inception of a desire and its physical realization cease to be sequential steps. They merge into a singular, unified phenomenon simply observed from two distinct dimensional vantage points. This profound alignment is the precise catalyst behind the startling, instantaneous synchronicities you have undoubtedly been navigating lately. What you are witnessing is the absolute collapse of temporal delay into a singular, zero-point moment of pure recognition. Consider moments when a highly specific, obscure question crosses your mind, and miraculously, the exact answer is already waiting in your email or casually uttered by a passerby on the sidewalk. Do not mistake this for rapid manifestation. Rather, you are tangibly experiencing the absolute reality of zero separation. You are finally waking up to the truth that the cosmos doesn't need to scramble to deliver your desires, because within this established state of arrival, you inherently contain every single thing you are searching for. That agonizing, desperate yearning that formerly acted as the engine for your reality creation has completely evaporated. After all, it is logically impossible to intensely crave a component that is already inextricably woven into your expanded auric structure. You have successfully exchanged the exhaustive physics of lacking for the effortless physics of being. Consequently, your internal landscape is now governed by a tranquil, detached preference rather than a chaotic, agonizing hunger. You have permanently retired from the exhausting habit of waiting for a better tomorrow. Instead, you have mastered the art of anchoring yourself so profoundly within the abyssal depths of the present moment that your desired future has no alternative but to materialize as a direct, harmonic echo of your immediate resonance. Moving forward, the second foundational principle you must adopt as an enlightened architect involves a radical communication shift, transitioning from the energy of petitioning to the absolute power of decreeing. For millennia, Humanity has been deeply conditioned to beg the cosmos for favors, to pray fervently, to set hopeful intentions, and to plead for external rescue. However, the vocabulary utilized by the architect completely discards the weak dialect of the beggar. It exclusively utilizes the commanding lexicon of a sovereign ruler. Consider a master builder drafting the schematics for a grand monument. They do not politely ask the paper if the structure would kindly prefer to exist. Rather, they definitively decree the physical form into reality through the uncompromising precision of their vision. The act of asking inherently vibrates at a frequency of profound poverty. It is a toxic, energetic broadcast that continuously fortifies the artificial wall separating the one who watches from the object being watched. Every time you utter the phrase, "I want," you are violently screaming into the ethereal fabric that you are currently devoid of that very thing. Consequently, within this post-observer paradigm, a strict new directive is enforced. Stop asking entirely. Your awakened consciousness has ceased acting as a subordinate begging an invisible deity. Instead, it is confidently issuing authoritative mandates directly to its own cellular structure. The exclusive dialect of the architect is simply, "I am," and therefore, it is. Do not confuse this stance with egotistical arrogance. Paradoxically, it is the ultimate expression of profound humility. It represents your absolute, unconditional surrender to your genuine identity as the fundamental creative engine of your own localized universe. By officially decreeing a specific state of existence, you are expending zero effort trying to persuade the universe to change its mind. You are merely ratifying the indisputable quantum evidence of your present frequency. Your spoken word has officially become the governing legislation of your personal reality matrix. As you acclimate to wielding the undeniable authority of the Absolute, the energetic environment surrounding you is forced into immediate submission, rapidly reconfiguring its atoms to mirror your declared truth. This elevated understanding naturally bridges into the third, and arguably most rigorously demanding protocol of the architect, the practice of hyperselective observation. Back in the primitive observer model, you weaponized your mental focus to aggressively force a specific timeline, desperately trying to collapse a wave of probability into a dense physical particle. Yet, operating as the architect of the Absolute, you possess the esoteric knowing that every conceivable parallel timeline already exists simultaneously, perfectly intact and fully formed, within the boundless superposition of the multidimensional field. Every imaginable iteration of your biography, ranging from the most breathtakingly glorious to the most painfully mediocre, is simultaneously broadcasting on its own unique bandwidth right this second. Thus, your job description has shifted. You are no longer burdened with the impossible task of inventing these realms from scratch. Your sole responsibility is to ruthlessly curate them. Understand that conscious attention is the singular, undisputed currency traded within the quantum economy. Whichever timeline you invest your sovereign focus into dictates the exact coordinate you will physically occupy. The mechanics are truly that elegantly simple. Should you desire to inhabit a dimension characterized by supreme tranquility and limitless abundance, you are required to become violently protective over the thoughts permitted to roam your psychological landscape. You must permanently lay down your weapons and stop violently opposing the circumstances you despise. The true secret is to gracefully starve them of oxygen, ignoring them until they dissolve into absolute nothingness within your personal orbit. This marks the definitive death of energetic resistance. You are officially relieved of the exhausting duty to repair a broken society or untangle the chaotic dramas of the dying matrix. You conquer those lower frequencies simply by aggressively withdrawing your life-sustaining gaze away from them. By intentionally starving those obsolete dramatic narratives of your precious conscious awareness, you systematically authorize them to wither away and vanish from your sensory perception. This deliberate purging clears massive energetic real estate, making ample room for the higher frequencies that perfectly harmonize with your newfound state of arrival. It is entirely normal if you initially feared that this migration toward radical neutrality and curated observation was merely a disguised symptom of sociopathic apathy or spiritual numbness. However, I invite you to peer much closer at the intricate emotional architecture of this profound phase. What you will discover is not emptiness, but an ocean of deep, crystalline, objective compassion. By perfectly mirroring the pristine impartiality of the universal field itself, you instantly transform into a monumental anchor of stability within a raging, collective sea of panic and turbulence. You have completely stopped feeding your precious reactive adrenaline into the chaotic machinery of the global psyche. Instead, you act as an immovable pillar of coherence, the perfectly still, silent eye locked precisely in the violent center of the cultural hurricane. Operating from this exalted sanctuary of emotional equilibrium, you effortlessly illuminate a pathway back to sanity for the rest of humanity. You achieve this not through frantic activism or physical intervention, but purely through the immaculate tonal frequency you silently emit. Embodying this vibration is, without question, the most supreme caliber of public service a soul can offer. You have ceased being a biological puppet reacting to the unpredictable physics of the universe. You have majestically assumed the throne as the primary source code from which those very physics emanate. You have forever closed your textbooks. You are no longer a struggling pupil studying the absolute. You stand today as its breathing, walking, irrefutable demonstration. The subtle yet undeniable hallmarks of this achieved mastery are blooming everywhere around you. The complete evaporation of the desperate urge to justify or explain your existence to others, the permanent cessation of hunting the horizon for numerical synchronicities, and the birth of a silent, unbreakable conviction that every single atom in the cosmos is arranged exactly as it was destined to be. Successfully commanding your personal reality is merely the prologue. This triumph is not the ultimate terminus. Rather, it serves as your golden ticket into an unprecedented era of collective ascension, a magnificent, unified space where fellow architects of the absolute finally begin to recognize and resonate with one another across the energetic grid. As you navigate your daily existence in this newly assumed role of the sovereign architect, imprint this truth heavily upon your psyche. Every single sunrise is a profound homecoming, never a rehearsal. Do not squander your precious morning bandwidth by immediately constructing mental blueprints of broken circumstances that supposedly require your repair. Instead, initiate your day by fully breathing into and embodying the seamless, unified field that you have already transformed into. You must govern your internal and external vocabulary with the ruthless precision of a grand master. Intercept those deeply ingrained, archaic habits of yearning or needing, and immediately transmute them into the unshakable power of being. Whenever you catch your mind whispering the weak phrase, "I hope," ruthlessly override it with the commanding declaration, "I recognize." Whenever you catch your ego anxiously scanning the horizon, desperately waiting for an external sign to validate your trajectory, gently remind yourself that your very capacity to observe is the ultimate proof of your sovereign, divine design. Furthermore, as dusk approaches and you reflect upon your day, resist the urge to evaluate your worth through the primitive lens of material productivity. Do not tally up what you forcefully bent into existence. Instead, search your memory for the undeniable, irrefutable data points of your newly installed quantum physics. Quietly bear witness to the effortless synchronicities that unfolded. Acknowledge the profound frictionlessness of your movements. Trace the undeniable patterns of zero-point separation that now serve as the distinct, glowing fingerprints of your upgraded reality matrix. The chaotic era of transition is definitively terminated. The weary sculptor has laid down their tools forever, and the grand edifice stands entirely complete. You are the polished marble. You are the breathtaking architecture. You are the absolute itself. The singular, exquisite task remaining on your itinerary is to step inside and occupy the breathtaking space you have constructed, moving with the profound grace and silent majesty of an entity that has completely, undeniably arrived. The profound stillness dwelling between your conscious thoughts is no longer a terrifying, empty void. Rather, it has become the pristine, luminescent canvas upon which your next magnificent masterpiece is effortlessly being curated. Draw in a massive, final, anchoring breath of this ultimate truth. The agonizing struggle has not merely concluded. From the highest vantage point of the cosmos, it never legitimately existed outside the hypnotic, temporary illusion of the journey. You are anchored here. You are fiercely present. And the infinite field stands at absolute attention, eagerly awaiting your next sovereign decree. If this monumental shift in your operational reality reverberates with undeniable truth within your cells in this exact moment, firmly anchor this frequency into the bedrock of our collective grid. Drop a comment below with the single powerful word "present" to officially broadcast your arrival and declare your absolute readiness to walk this earth as an awakened architect of the absolute. This is not a conclusion. It is the glorious end of the prologue and the initiation of an eternal, cosmic dialogue that possesses no end. You are no longer a fragmented soul desperately hunting for the light in the darkness. You are the blinding light, gazing back out into the grand theater of the world. You are the living architecture of the absolute, and your very existence is the ultimate masterpiece. Breathe. Recognize. Simply be.